what we're dealing with is the pelvis and the waist area. And really, there's a lot of misconceptions sort of about the pelvis itself. And there's a lot of different ways that artists use for taking and communicating how they deal with the pelvis. Now, there's three basic different approaches. One is thinking of the pelvis as the form of a bowl, spine coming in. The other is taking and visualizing the pelvis as a series of discs down, and the idea of the box. Now, in reality, none of those look like the pelvis. Okay, and that's where we basically do. But they all have their useful qualities about them that we can use. So you have to always look at what you use to take and try to understand something is separate from actually the thing itself. Now, you look at the pelvis. First of all, it's not a bowl from the back. What you see is that the pelvis, in reality, is an S curve. This is really a curve. You have actually different planes. You have a plane going through here, you have a plane going through here, you've got a plane going out through here. So the idea of that is the idea of seeing it as a bowl. Well, yes, it looks like a bowl from the inside, but drawing-wise, you never see the inside. And what we see is the manifestation of how the muscles attach to the outside. Okay, so the idea. So let's take and go through some of this stuff now. So the bowl doesn't work. I mean, it works as a sort of a way of thinking about it. It can also be misleading, because what you're looking at, and we're talking about pelvis as being an S curve. Looking from the top, the inside is a curve, but the actual outside shape does this. So this is basically an S curve. Now, so we really need to be able to think about this surfaces here and here. Now, the idea of the disc, well, yes, the top part is a disc. Or as we look at this is a disc. But there's also a second series of shapes that we got to go through that are going at almost right angles to those discs. We have the whole line going this way to the pubic arch, which is, again, the opposite of what we've got with the top part of the pelvis. So that idea has to be modified. So the idea here then is we have to be conscious of the fact that you have a pubic arch with lines that are taking and going off this way underneath. Now it goes back to the ischial tuberosity in the back. Now the box. Pelvis doesn't look at anything like a box. The only thing the box is really useful for is that it takes and gives us this frontal plane here, and the fact that we tend to see the sides going back this way. So the end result of all this is that the best thing to do is to know the pelvis. Now, once you know the pelvis, you can use all of these, knowing that they have absolutely nothing to do as far as looking really like the pelvis. But that they're just tools, they're useful ways of thinking about it. Okay? So now when we deal with the pelvis, now I tend to work with the box idea more than anything. Now, what you want to be able to think about now, pelvis first we have as we leave the end of the iliac crest here, this is really a surface that goes up. Pubic arch is, using the idea of the box, is in line with this plane, with this flat plane going across through here. And what we actually get then is a triangular shape in here. Now, as this is rising, then it's actually also at the same time is taking and turning and going back at an angle like this. Then it is taking and going back down, and we go back out the other side then. So we're going up, returning, and going in. Now, your trochanter, your hip bone, now is taking and pulling out from about this point here, outside. And the pubic arch then is continuing on down underneath this way. So what I'm doing here then is taking in, starting out, essentially visualizing this thing as a box, but realizing right away, of course, that it's not a box. Okay, that it changes the surface. Okay, so it's a little mental gymnastics that you go through as a way of trying to understand what you're working with. Now, if we look at the pelvis from the back now, and we're taking looking from back in here. This of course dealt with how to sort of, okay. Now, what we have, we're taking and really points here at the end here. We have this, and then we have the tuberosities down here at the bottom. Okay. So this in here is a plane, again, which would correspond roughly to the box. Okay. That's paralleling the plane out in front through here. So we, in other words, taking this plane here, and we're taking the line from here to here. So that roughly is a box. Now, what happens though is, again, it's not close to what we actually see. So if we look at this in profile, then what we see is we have pelvis, we have the front coming down, we have the pubic arch, and it's going at an angle like this. Now, as this comes back to the end out here, it's slightly higher than the front part here. And we've got the tuberosities in the back taking and coming down. These are roughly lining up. Your hip bone is coming out of here. This is going in, coming forward. Now, one of the things I think a lot of times we don't realize, and it's something I really became really aware of in dealing with animal drawing, is that how our spine takes and curves and comes at an angle this way. So that your tailbone now is actually coming through and going, as we feel the spine curve goes up, and we're coming through in this direction. So what happens when we start dealing with the muscles then? We actually end up with a shape that really starts going up this way. So our box now really takes and starts getting modified when we start thinking about in terms of the volume. Now, I want to go through and let's take and expand on this with the rib cage. Here, starting with the seven cervical vertebrae here, the top of the rib cage, and the spine coming down. I'm doing this sort of 3/4 now. Through. Rib cage is taking and tilting forward. You couldn't see it, can't see it from here, but the neck would be here, on the sternum here, bottom of the 10th rib here, got floating ribs. The distance then from here to the end of the iliac crest would be equal. this takes it pulling forward. Now we start to deal with this is lifting up. On the other side, we would be feeling that this is lifting up here. As it comes through here, now this is really where it's an optical illusion. It's very difficult to draw it. Even sometimes when looking at the model, it's hard to realize that what we have here is an S curve. Starting from here, the thing goes in, does this, and comes back out. So as I'm drawing this, I'm actually thinking now that this, instead of this plane out here, this is actually turning and going in, and then it's taking and coming back out. So we get this change in here, but when you draw it like that, it looks just like a regular arc. But it's not, it's really going in space. And what happens is we have the same problem when we're looking at the clavicle. Now, if I draw the vanishing side over here, you see that this plane is going in. This is the surface going in this way. The spine's coming down. Now, there's a fair amount of space in here now. There's steps down. Tailbone is coming out. This is now going back. This part here, see, is curved. This is going in that direction. Here. And then it takes and turns and comes back around to what we have over here. Now, if we were looking at this straight from the back, these points at the end of your iliac crest here, this point, these points here, coming straight down will line up with the tuberosities here at the back. Now, this is actually fairly important because what you're dealing with, these are the points then that all of your large leg muscles in the back attach to. So we've got this coming down through here, and these are going in this way. This goes into the pubic arch underneath here. Here, the pubic arch is hidden over on this side, and we've got your trochanter, we've got this stuff coming out in here. So now, go through. Now, from this point here, coming off of the back, I need to bring my other skeleton on here. Coming off the back here, you actually have helps to have the rib cage going in the right direction, okay? But what if this guy's had a bad spinal problem here, okay? Now, what we actually have, you have two layers of muscles that are pulling off of the surface here. One layer takes and comes off the whole base here of your sacrum and goes up alongside your spine. Then you have another layer on top of that, but the muscle part doesn't start until we start getting up into the rib cage. And we sort of call this, the sacrospinatus muscles. Okay. Now, so these become the two large. First one is a narrow tube that goes up alongside of your spine. Now, this is a very prominent shape that we see here. Coming down through here. The second part, which is taking and attaching on the outside edge, is taking and sitting on top of the rib cage in here like this. So these become very, very, very clear. And you've got definite space in between as the spine comes through. And you feel these tubes going up the side this way. These are coming down and they're literally filling in the space that we have at the back here. Except that we always basically feel these dimples at this point. Now, the other part that we can take and deal with right from this angle, your external oblique muscles. Now, we'll take and let's look at this also from sort of a three-quarter front view at the same time here. Pit the neck, high and back. Center coming out. Putting a little bit of perspective here. Thoracic arch. Now remember, the rib cage is not perfectly oval. It actually has a tendency to be flattened on the sides. Through. The distance from here to here is equal to the ends of the iliac crest here. This now, remember, is going up at an angle like this. Turns going in and coming back out. So we feel this corner coming up here. Pubic arch is half of this distance here. And that corresponds to where your trochanter is coming out of here. So these are your landmarks that we're working for. Now, the external oblique is actually part of a sheet that goes over actually your stomach muscles. Now, maybe we should need to put those in first here, so that we think that what you have in the front here is our rectus abdominis muscles, which take and actually attach to the pubic arch right here. So you have a line that goes down the center, and it's referred to as basically it's the white line. Okay. Now, the muscles are pulling off of the rib cage here. They come down and are attaching to this point here. Now, the muscles work as a series of bunches of muscles with gaps in between that we take and refer to as sort of as our apse, the navel here at the waist. Now, the pattern for these shapes can vary. We think of the center line as being basically horizontal. As we move up, they become more arched as they go, and the final arch then being the thoracic arch itself. And now, these muscles, as the groupings that are created, don't have to be symmetrical. They can be really quite different. In fact, the line doesn't even have to go straight across. It can vary from one individual to another. So there's a lot of variety within that. So we tend to make this sort of stylized Superman or Batman look, but it doesn't necessarily work that way. Okay. Also, at this point here, if you look at the rib cage here, skeleton, you have this point that comes down. Well, the thoracic arch we're really talking about is coming to here. This point, as it drops, you can have muscles that take and come across here, your transverse muscles that pull across, which changes the shape of the thoracic arch, so that we can actually get a shape that looks more square across here as we're coming down. Now, these muscles actually, you have a very, very clear cut, or hopefully you have a very clear cut side to it. That there's actually a plane. In other words, if we looked at this from a top view, we would see that in the center, it dips in, the muscles are going across, and then again there's no muscle in the space on either side, so you actually have these very clear-cut rows of muscles coming down here. So there's thickness to them, there's side coming across, and steps down. And now we go back and we talk about this external oblique muscle that pulls in here. The external oblique takes and attaches and goes into the ribs. The ribs are coming down through, around this way. The external oblique takes and fits into the under margin of the ribs. So we start to get, and on the top, remember we have the serratus anterior muscles that are coming down and creating these finger-shaped parts that are coming down from up above, from underneath the scapula. And now what we get is the external oblique now is fitting into these points coming through This pulls down through here. Now, as this comes down, what you get then, it's actually part of this sheet that goes over your stomach muscles. But the actual meaty part of the muscles takes and stops in here, and the shape then is going through, and it actually pulls it up into here, coming through and going up this way. So it doesn't actually take in, you don't feel the actual muscle fibers actually aren't attaching to bone. It's part of the tissue that goes over the thing and is coming down over through this thing. But the muscle now, we can see is coming down, go through, goes into here. Now, if you look at it from this point here, what is not very clear in the way I'm drawing this here is that the external oblique actually can then take and have a look that goes out past, and then generally does, goes out like this. So we feel a pull, this is pulling down, but it's really going up in here. So this becomes a very clear cut point through here. Now, the important part here is though that the actual shape of the muscle, what we see is really something more like this. This is where the term comes from when we refer to it as the flank pad. Because it looks like a pad on your flank. The dominant shape is actually the rib cage. The line of the ribs coming through. We feel this line, and we feel when we get folds, whatever, we feel this line pulling across this way. So this becomes a shape. But the real shape that we deal with is the rib cage, when we feel the pull from the rib cage to this external oblique muscle. So on the other side here, then this would be coming over here like this. We've got this coming through, start to pull through here. We've got the sacrospinatus muscles that are pulling up in here. Now, you also have, and we dealt with this a bit when we were talking about the upper torso, is that we have coming from underneath and just going across the edge of the scapula, going up to the arm, we have the latissimus dorsi, which is coming back and attaching back in here, this way. Now, from here we would also be seeing then, of course, your serratus anterior muscles coming through in here. And these are fitting up into that. This is all building, so we get this another mass building in here with the latissimus coming, and then of course we have the scapula itself, which is underneath and going out through there. So these volumes, and you actually have a point in here. Now, when we look at the a general shape that we look at, let's say if we look at it, looking at a female model, now what we see is something really quite different generally. If we take the basic shape, the rib cage, coming down. You think of the pelvis, back here. We've got the spine coming through. We have our sacrospinatus, we have the pelvis going out. The female pelvis is slightly wider, and this is actually emphasized by the fact that the shape, the angle of the thoracic arch from the male to the female will change, or generally. It's that the angle, the opening of the thoracic arch for a female is roughly 60 degrees, and for the male it would be closer to like 90 degrees. So that makes the male rib cage seem wider, the female rib cage seem narrower, where the male pelvis will tend to be higher and narrower, and the female pelvis will be shorter and wider. So then, these are sort of general. So when you start adding these things up, that what we get, looking at the female then, is we get this shape here, we get the pelvis that is wider out here. Well, now what you have is we have fat pads across the back. Well, men have fat pads too. But it's the female shape tends to be, these pads are filling up this general area in here. So what we see then is a line that looks like that, which is the very characteristic look then for a female. We feel this pulling out, and then combining with the fact that the widest point is on the thighs, not the buttocks so much, we get this sort of triangular shape type thing starting out. Okay, now let's go back into this a bit more now. And now, when we start talking about the buttocks muscles, what you have is that, first of all, your trochanter here, okay, the muscles that are coming from here are coming over, and within this area here, you have a ligament that all of this stuff is coming down and attaching to. Now, the two primary muscles that we really deal with are the gluteus medius and the gluteus maximus. Okay, now this is really where it becomes important to think of the angles of the pelvis itself. So that here we start out, we're looking at this corner here. These muscles now are coming over this way and pulling down to this point here. The shape is coming out like something like this. This is going over the surface, coming down and pulling into here. There's no muscles over the end of your hip bone, your trochanter here. These muscles are coming down and pulling through in here. Now, the buttocks, the gluteus maximus, is pulling all the way from in here, off of your tailbone here, and this pulls and wraps around and is going over here to your femur. Now, you're doing this, these muscles are taking and going over this surface like this, coming down and going over and pulling through here. Now, if we look at the side that's going away from you, what you see then is these muscles right here now are taking and doing this. We're seeing this is a plane that is going away from you. This plane is going back that direction, not taking into account any kind of fat or anything. So what we get is these surfaces. Let's take and look at this a little more. Okay, looking more from the back. Now, hitting the dimples, the back here, the triangle, rear sacrum. Now, what I'm saying is that this surface here is going back this way, and we're going in this direction. This goes in, then it's coming out. And so we get a plane across here, and the buttocks themselves then are taking and going down at an angle like this. Again, like I provided, there's no extra baggage in there. Trochanter is sticking out over here. So we see there's this flat plane here going down, flat plane going in here, with this stuff coming through. External oblique coming in, so your latissimus coming down, this going up. So this is a flat plane here. And we're changing directions and going down here. Now, if that pelvis was that round bowl on the outside, all of this would be going out, coming out this way, rather than having this plane. And you can look, clearly, your athletes, you see runners, your basketball players, you see very clearly dancers, you see very clearly how all of these shapes work out. Now, let's take and go to the front now. You're looking at the pelvis now from the front. And these are going back up. Pubic arch here. Now, your trochanter, great trochanter femur here. Legs going in this way. Now, so we had the gluteus medius muscle, which was coming out of here, coming down. This is pulling down this way. Through. The external oblique would be up here, coming forward. Here. Now, chances are, in the angle I'm drawing here, you would see very little of the gluteus maximus back here. But we see these muscles now are going over, coming down this way. Now, what happens here is dealing with how we make this transition then from making the rib cage to the pelvis. But we need to be able to see this section, and we'll talk more about this when we deal with the leg. But what you have is a series of muscles that come from the inside of the pelvis that are pulling. You have this ligament that goes across this point here. You have to feel this form through here. You have muscles that come from the inside of the pelvis, coming around over to the leg, this way underneath this, which creates part of the fall. But none of these large muscles of the leg actually attach to the top part of the pelvis here. Okay. Now what's going on there then is that as these muscles come from underneath, they're coming through in here. And all of these large muscles, your quadriceps, are attaching to the femur here. You have your abductors that come from underneath the pelvis and coming forward this direction. But at this connection point here, we have two muscles. One is the tensor of the fascia latae, which comes down this way. Here. And you have a sartorius muscle, which comes from the same space, same point up here, and goes down to the leg. So we actually then have, and at this point then, is where your actual leg takes and bends. And what we deal with there is that you have, as you take a look at the pelvis, if you put your thumb on the corner of your pelvis and put 3 fingers underneath it, provided your cell phone's not in the way, okay? Put 3 fingers down and bend your leg. That's where you actually bend the leg. That's 3 fingers down. That's referred to actually as the 3-finger gap. So now we look at the figure from profile. Now you can see when you're drawing this in profile that the extra curve we're talking about in the pelvis is very difficult to actually see. You really are taking and looking at, you have to be imagining this thing. The front pubic arch is here, the trochanter is here. Okay. The buttocks muscles are coming down, pulling over to here. You get this sort of hollow at this point because this is where all of these muscles are attaching to this connective tissue here. This becomes the iliotibial tract that the tensor that is coming across here is actually attaching to. Your gluteus maximus muscles now are coming from behind and they're pulling over this way. So now you can see the angle that's being created here now. The pubic arch is here, and the other leg, rest of your quadriceps would be up here. The stomach muscle is coming down and attaching to this point in the pubic arch. So, and the spine now, remember, is curved. This is taking and coming out and going through here. You have those sacrospinatus muscles now, which are pulling through here. Now, one of the characteristics here, male pelvis tends to be vertical, which is what I'm drawing here. And theoretically, our stomach muscles are coming straight down. Okay, now, the female pelvis is generally tilted. So that'll be at an angle going like this. So this angle coming across this way. Now, what that does is obviously if we take this and we tilt it, that's going to throw the stomach muscles out a bit more. It's also going to throw out the buttocks muscles this way. So the shape that we see then is much more of a curved shape that we're looking at. It has to do as much with the pelvis, the shape of the tilt of the pelvis, as it does with any muscles or fat that you're dealing with. Now, if we go back now, let's look at the whole process here again and see this as a working with it using the idea of the box. Again, going back to the back here, if I take and start out with the idea of saying, well, okay, the pelvis is a box, which we know it's not a box, okay? We take and visualize this shape. That's just giving us a rough orientation now of the direction, but we know that the spine comes at an angle. We know that we have the pelvis rises in front, so maybe now we need to start thinking of this as sort of part of a trunk. Okay. And the axial shape then, these buttocks muscles going back, and the fact that it's tilting back, what we really need then to start modifying our box is being something that's looking like this. And where the spine is coming through here. So now we're changing our perception of what this whole thing works like. We've got this plane in the back, we've got the planes coming down. This is actually taking and going back in a little bit this way. And we feel where the dimples are back here, this is going in. So these shapes then are taking and working over that way. But the box is really, you think of it for orientating in space, dealing with stuff. Now we need to take and look a little more carefully now at what happens. Okay, first, we say we have the rectus abdominis coming down this way. You have your navel, essentially the center. These two rows coming down here. We have our external oblique, which is the flank pad now, coming down from here. We have our gluteus medius, and we have our tensor coming across. We have adductors that are coming through on the way and going this way. Now, what happens in here is that you've got, again, everybody there's fat pads. So the shape, now if we start to take in, let's just give this whole take in, start bending this over a little bit. And I'm going to start working much simpler. Feeling is coming down. Now, what happens is this point as you start bending over, you're taking in first the rib cage is getting pushed in. We feel a compression, but the folding starts taking place now in here. We actually can feel these surfaces starting to push down, and the whole belly, I'm going to take and give this figure a little bit more weight now. So we start to feel this starts to come out. But we still feel the corner Yeah, going across from here to here. We work around this surface now. And we're pulling in, getting a pull that's coming down from here. So now I've added some muscles, or some fat pads, I should say, under the tummy, coming across through here. You feel it. Now remember, the leg bends 3 fingers down here. You would feel the trochanter, or the external oblique coming through. The trochanter is out here. Start to feel the pull. Now, we really start focusing on what's overlapping. If we take and we're stretching, if we stretch this back, now let's say the person is fairly lean. Thoracic arch. Very strong. We actually can feel the underside of the thoracic arch, and we can feel the rectus abdominis muscle pulling from that and stretching and coming down. We feel the pull off of the surface here, coming down, going through. We start to feel the edges. You can see where I'm drawing now. I'm drawing the outside edge. That thing turns away, and the external oblique would be back behind that. Here, we would start to get a real strong pinching taking place. As this drops down, and we feel the pull from behind, how these forms now will start to go over, piling up. So you're getting, what's happening here then is I'm actually even giving a little bit more of a tilt coming out towards me here. That as we deal with this, then you have to keep in mind that these muscles they don't go past this point. They're attaching up here and they're coming down to here. So the minute you take and do any kind of pinching, it's going to start creating a compression. If you start to take and stretch it, you're getting a pulling through here. Same thing now if we take and rotate or try to give it some kind of a twist. We're working with the corners. If I take and really twisting the figure, now we feel the stretching coming across, but on this side, you're getting a compressing going in, and all of these things now start to pull around that corner, feeling a stretching, pulling around, and we start to feel the twisting, things are pulling, coming through. These things are taking, and now we'll begin, start to feel a compressing on this side. Feel the pull coming through, and here. And feel. So you're always trying to work with these corners, trying to feel the corners coming across, going over the surface of the form. Then, when you look at the pelvis, at this, say, this point here, even when you look at it here, we actually can see the flat top side of the bone. You always look for this corner, you always look for the flat edge, then we can actually feel where the muscle is taking, and we have a plane in here. So as this, here I'm taking and saying, well, we have a box that's taking and going in this direction, realizing that it's not a box, okay? But we can actually feel then there's a top plane to this surface. Then in this case, this would be going away from us behind. The buttocks is going back. We could take and actually feel there's a top surface. But the way the muscle comes down here, and the way we start to see this hollow creating, it actually gives you the appearance, quite often, of a box that we go through. So we use it. Now here I would be really thinking of this as pushing down through here, dealing with fat pads. Now, one of the things that you have to consciously be thinking of when you're drawing now is that you actually use all of these anatomical points to take and help the gesture or push the action, rather than being focused on being perfectly anatomically correct all the time. It's the action that counts. You look, the understanding of the anatomy helps you to take and understand, or it allows you, it gives you leeway how you can pick and choose where to put the lines you want to put to make the action clear. That's really what you're working at. So let's go looking at this from the back now. Let's take a now I'm dealing just a very, very simple volume. Come through. Yeah, I look to the dimples like I look across to the corners of the pelvis. Think of the pubic arch, to this triangle. Same thing I do at the back. I look to the dimples. And following the spine. Now, of course, the spine, when you take and bend over, it straightens out and it's no longer that S curve. Surface now is going through. Think of the triangle of the sacrum. Now, visualizing these are going in. Okay, let's say the leg here is going down this way, and the other leg is going back through here. Now, here I'm going to take and drawing more of a female shape. In that here I would take and be picking up, feeling the action, I would be feeling, using that fat pad I was talking about. But this is where you actually feel the shape now coming through, and you sense this whole rib cage is behind. So I'm pulling through, and here the buttocks with the flanks would be coming out this way. Here we're pulling through and going over the surface, feeling that it's going behind. And as the pelvis takes and goes in, and then turns and comes out, we then feel the pull over to here, and this whole shape now is going in here, coming around, pushing in. And over here, you're dealing with the tensor muscle that's taking and pulling down from here. So that tensor muscle now is something that's coming in front of these abductors of the leg. So they're overlapping that you're getting. The gluteus muscles are pulling in front of the large biceps of the femur, coming through in this way. So we feel shape. So you actually have corners here pulling down. We feel this surface is pulling down to where the trochanter would be here. As you can see now that even here, if I'm putting a fair amount of weight on this figure, as you can still see that we have a plane that's going back that way with the extra fat pads in here. And then we would feel this coming through. Here I'm putting the weight on this leg, so I would tend to flatten that out and let this be more relaxed. So you're building, you're seeing, I'm using these fat pads here. So anatomically, this actually is very simple. It's not really that complex now. And I would really be trying to see these sacrospinatus muscles now that pull up. And then we start going through and building all the rest. But you, working with these planes, you've got these very clear-cut points of attachment. You've got here, you've got through here. You know where the muscles are coming down in the back. You're working off the curvature of that pelvis. See here, I'm diagram going back over this. I'm drawing this as going in, and then it turns and comes back. So it's going in, coming out, and going back down. That's the hardest part. That when you look at it, it's hard to see that. You have to know it, be able to recognize what's going on. Let's see if we've anything else we've got just out of here. this becomes really an important element here. To always be conscious of how this comes. One other thing we can take a look at here. Let's do this when that rib cage starts coming down through here. As we're drawing that rib cage, pushing. Let's take it and say it's really pushing down, thoracic arch, say here, coming across, and we got the pelvis pushing up. This part here can get buried underneath. And so what you always try to feel this line, so as it's coming down, the way you push the tone to feel that rib cage, then you can then sense that this part is coming up. You can feel the fold. We're creating the fold by the way we stop the tone. And we start to use also showing the pinch, start to come up. Then we start to even go more, but you can feel the rib cage pushing down into that. Then we start to come across. But you're really focusing on these as being a series of cylinders as they actually work around from behind at the waist. And then we're coming through. So it's the pushing down, compressing. You always try to feel the shape as the shape of the rib cage comes down through here. You feel this pushing down through here. You could take and see how now, in this case, I'm giving a stretching. We feel the stretching of the flank pad coming full. We feel this actually behind now. So it's the stretch, it's the compression. We use these lines are taken, trying to wrap around. Now, one other thing we could talk about here a little bit here is how we gain weight. Now, depending on how much beer you've had, okay, men tend to take and gain weight above the belt. So you see the shape comes off, we go out like this. What we refer to as the gut. Okay. But this rounded, we have a dog here, or a horse or something, and you find that where their rib cage comes down, we feel the same thing. Okay? Now, female tends to gain weight below the belt. So that's really more of a pear shape. Okay. Guys are above the weight belt. Women tend to wear the belts higher. Okay. But anyway, another time, we'll go into leg and stuff, we'll talk more about weight. Okay. But that, I think we pretty much get a basic idea of how all of these things, it's not that. Corners, feel the pressure, the pushing down. So this side is stretching. The other side is compressing. So you feel as the pressure of the rib cage pushes down, we're seeing the external oblique taking and being forced out. On the other side, you're seeing the stretch of the external oblique down. Same time, we take the basic shape here. We're dealing with this really as sort of a box type form. Coming down. Let's get a little closer here. Now to look at the pattern being created as the rectus abdominis muscles come down to pelvic area. And the actual fat pad on the pubic arch. Now, continuing this idea that I started here, pulling down, you look to see the shape of the thoracic arch, corners of the rib cage. Okay. Stomach muscles pull down, and even here now, we're starting to see the compression being caused by the pose itself now. Now, angle, got this box type of shape here. You see the legs fitting into this. First, we're seeing a cylinder. Okay. Cylinder leg is coming out and over the surface. In the direction of that leg. Now, the straight that you're seeing here is really corner of the pelvis, plus the fact that the weight is shifted. If this is going in. So this is also part of the gluteus medius back here. Then we start to see tensor pulling away from the pelvis, and we feel these muscles now pulling and fitting in. You can actually here now see also we look at the coming through, you can feel the tendon that pulls from the pelvis through here. See the light actually hitting the edge of this. And now we've got the sartorius is cutting across from here going through. And we feel the large abductors coming out from underneath. So you actually have two different cylinders that take place at this point now, where we can see the main part of the leg, your rectus femoris and your vastus muscles taking and creating a cylinder that's going in this way, with your abductors taking and coming off the pelvis to the bone. The other side, again, round, come up with the tensor pulling off of the edge, and you really feel the pressure now, pinching in. You can feel how this actually comes over a little farther. See the tensor pulling off at this point, and down to the outside. You've got the actual feel of the pelvis here, and we can see the gluteus muscles taking and going behind. At this point, we're feeling the right trochanter of the femur sticking out. And as we head on the other side here, you want to see the basic volume of the leg itself. You have two different directions. Here, we get this help to see this by the sartorius, which is coming down through here and wrapping around the bottom of the knee. So we have this define this basic cylinder, then with the abductors coming out from behind, underneath to here. Now, look at this some more. We have a little bit of time here to take and really see the fact that when you're drawing this whole area here, that this is actually a curved surface. You have a corner. You can feel this edge of the abdominis muscle coming down, and we can feel the corner of the external oblique facing us. Feel the rib cage, corners, the rib cage. Feel the fullness, the abdominis muscle coming down. And again, we feel the shape of the sections here coming across. Feel here, I've taken actually
we push this rib cage out a little bit more. Try to keep in mind when you're looking at this area here that you're actually seeing two separate, clearly defined muscles that the rectus femoris is going in between. You got your tensor and your sartorius, and then we see the buttocks muscles behind, and that the dividing line here is the actual edge of the pelvis. And you can see, I'm drawing this a little bit even more clearer here. Let's focus on that a little bit more. You can see the actual feel the edge, thickness of the bone here, and the fact that these muscle is coming down to this and actually putting across the end. Okay, now taking a look at the back. Again, take and very simply block in. Feeling again, it's the relationship rib cage to pelvis. Feel the movement. You'll feel the way the rib cage is pushing out. This is round, going to the corner, through. Tension, as you feel the pull, spine down to the corners of the pelvis. You're really seeing it across the form. Now, in the back here, the big part that we first deal with is the large sacrospinalis muscles. You really feel is pulling down to sacrum. You see how they take and they build up into the rib cage on both sides. Now, with the weight is actually on the left leg here, but he's pulled the other leg is pulled back and up, so we're getting a pinching on this side. So let's first visualize this again as a simple box type volume, clear cut side, one leg going in, and the other leg coming back out. Now, just like in the last drawing, we have a very definite pinching being created. Feel the shape of the pelvis going up. These muscles now are coming from behind, overlapping and fitting into that. Get a little closer. Now, in making that shape, they're really drawing the shape of the pelvis. Now, on the other side, you can feel the pelvis going around. What you see here now is a real, after we get establish the corner here, again, let's make it a real clear-cut corner. You can feel the stretch of these muscles taking and pulling off of the rib cage and pulling around behind. You feel these large muscles again, and up. Now, as we buttocks come back here, this one goes down underneath. First we get the shape, the triangle here of the sacrum. You can feel the buttocks going down and in. The overlapping this form as it comes down. Look for the corner on the other side. The whole shape here. Now, what you are seeing are these muscles taking and pulling through, and coming down, and feel the stretching across. Trochanter pulled in, and muscles pull down and around. Okay, as you move over here, we see the tensor coming from behind back in here, and then the muscles or the upper part of the leg going in between and underneath. Here, and to really emphasize, this is the forms are fitting into this. On the other side, we get just the opposite type of effect. As this one is going under, I want to take and emphasize now. Here, I'm actually changing a little bit of what's there. I want to take
go from there.
Feel this going over, this part sticking out, around. Now, this line actually goes like this. I want that there because it's part of the real thing. At the same time, I want to emphasize the fact that this part of the leg is going back this way. So it really becomes sort of a bit of a problem. So now if I'm doing this, then I want to look at more. I look at it and say, well, okay. I'm coming out from behind, back here. I'm going to take and if I push this corner, we feel the squareness of this corner here. And I've got this side dropping down in here. Then I can actually cheat a little bit here and create a cast shadow that is going to go over the leg this way. That will take and accomplish a lot of what I want. And then at the same time, I can take and have some of the folds taking and doing that as they wrap around. Okay. Now, I'm going to move this down a little bit so we can see. Okay, now, if this comes back, we've got to pull out the thigh. Now, these are the large abductors coming out in here. And again, I'm going over the surface this way. So I want to take and feel these volumes, one side to the other, going behind, front, and going back. The back of the knee fitting in. Okay. Now, the other side, I take and push the opposite direction. Okay, I've got this forms going this way. Here, I'm pulling, and I want to make forms going the other direction to show that leg going in. And so this becomes the primary concern then is to take and make the form and the direction really clear. Okay. That's now we could take in the upper part to pull back a little bit here. This part right here tends to feel a little flat. I really need to try to make this go back more that way, and at the same time get this to take and come down a little bit more. So we can get feeling full here. Now that back goes up. I would start to look for ways that I can find, get the eye to go over the surface this way. Still focusing on here, I want to take and go back here. Instead of using a tone here, I need to use the cast shadow on one side, coming through. That again helps to show the volume. Up, across, to take and work the corner, to take and I guess again go over the surface more this way. Now, this carrying through this idea of working these volumes. Now, even though I'm just really focusing on the pelvis here, you want to see these things fitting one into the other. So you continually are working over the surface. And you emphasize here, pushing a stronger tone to make that, you feel the action even more. Tension, come back in, and even make this stronger by pulling this behind more. But you really start to feel the twist. The actual shoulder taken goes down and over here more. So you lifting one side up, dropping the other side. I'd really take and try to pull up, back, and around. And you're making these things build one on top of the other. Okay, now we're getting more of a side view here. Okay. Again, action. Try to feel stress, tension. I'm really pulling. Okay. See the volume, rib cage here. Here again, feeling that spine pulling down, rib cage pushing out, stomach going down. Feel the pelvis pushing out. The leg going down, the other one taking and going out. Shoulders coming across. Again, the other one's going back out. Now again, focusing on the pelvis. And we'll come in a little closer for that now. Okay. Now, first, the action is like this. So what that's doing, throwing the corner of the rib cage. We feel the rib cage pushing out. You want to feel push. And as that pushes out, we got the pelvis is actually taking and being pushed down. Feel the corner. It's a very clear corner. Okay. Look for the back, where the dimples are, in the back of the pelvis. A very short distance in here because of the perspective going back in. Now, feel the pull of the muscles in the back. Sacrospinalis, taking, coming through. Tension. And the rib cage behind builds up to the larger portion of it, building through. Now, same time here, in this view particularly, we're getting the latissimus taking and pulling through, across, and scapula. Okay. Let's get back to the pelvis here. Now, feeling this, it's important to think of the fact that now we've got the external oblique is pulling from here, going out and through, is going over the edge of the pelvis. Okay. And it's stretching, this leg takes and goes down. This is the cylinder going down. You feel this large tensor muscle now really pulling down. And the muscles from the upper part of the leg going in behind that. Okay. As we work our way around that pelvis, we're working around a corner here. These muscles are coming off of the pelvis, pushing down. You've got very clear shape of the trochanter pushing its way out, and muscles are pulling down to that. Okay. As we work around this, these muscles are pulling off of that pelvis, pulling down, coming around from behind. Down a little bit with this. The muscles, if we look, try to feel the fact that there's a corner out here. These are taking and working around and coming down. And you can see the overall shape. The muscles are going down and fitting into here. So we actually can see there's an edge that these work around to where they attach to this iliotibial tract or the fascia latae, whichever you prefer. Then from behind here, you can see how the biceps of the femur are coming in from behind and underneath the buttocks muscles. Then feel this taking and pulling down. And the other side, we're taking here, this leg is taking and dropping down, coming through, going this way. So you have this cylinder going the opposite direction in here. Now, what we need to see here is that there's a distance from here going back into here. Let's get back up on this. Okay. The stomach going back underneath. Okay. Now, feel the surface, this form here. And you can actually see now, working with the tone, you can take and bring out this corner a bit more, dropping back. So you can feel this pulling back up into here. Feel the rib cage coming down into here. And we get the latissimus dorsi really pulling into here, which actually comes back and attaches down into here. Now, the surface, as he's taking and twisting this way, you need to be looking at the other side, and this part is going away, and scapula is pulling even out more that way. All of that helps to take and show the fact that there's really getting a big twist taking place. So we really feel these forms going over. This is pulling back, definite corners. Feel the pull. Forms setting out, off, overlapping. This is going the other direction this way. Feel pulling through, building on top, and wrapping around behind. So all of these things sort of work together. Now, we need to make more of getting this to feel round in here. So this pull from front, we make this even stronger, and try to show that this part of the thigh is pulling behind. Take and make more feeling for the volume. Through, down. Now, as I look at this, I think, well, I need to make even this stronger yet. I need to really make that pull down. Make the pull more and through. And feel here. Okay. Okay. Now this one really shows a lot of tension. I'm going to take and draw this fairly large, at least for the pelvic area now. Again, focus on the fact that the rib cage is really facing a different direction now. Start to see. Look for where the corners. Really try to see the corners of the rib cage, so it really gives you a sense of perspective. For shortening the forms, we're looking the symmetry and going across. Feel there, try to feel the pull up, pelvis. Look at the corner of the pelvis is up. The other part is down, underneath. Again, visualizing this as a mass, very definite. There's a square type corner to it. Back in. Feel the leg pulling out. Now I'm not doing this is just to as a way of diagramming for you. It's actually a way of taking and actually doing the drawing. So don't be afraid to take and draw the boxes, draw the cylinders, and just follow through with stuff. See? Okay. That gives things the shoulders coming across, arm coming down. Okay. I want to focus on the pelvis area. Now, again, it's seeing the compression taking place between these parts. Now, you feel the pushing, feel the rib cage underneath, and we want to get the roundness. He's twisting, and he's compressing at the same time here. So we feel the flank pad being pushed up against this. It's like, visualize this is like a section of a cylinder that's taking and wrapping around the waist. And we come across, we're taking and pinching. You really feel this pinch coming through. Pinch. Let's come in a little closer to see that. Okay, now the corner is over here. We got to really be thinking of this as like a corner of a box here. So as we pull, the pressure is pulling around these forms, and you're working around, coming up and over that surface. So you can really see this form coming up. You make the forms, you're thinking cross section, you want to feel over the surface, coming out from behind. Now, this is just one. I think now, as we've got this is going this way, we feel the rib cage is coming down, and we get a series of forms that are going the other way. This coming, this pushing down, coming through, pulling out, and we really make this thing now wrap around and over that surface. Now, as we keep working on this, again we'll pull from here. These forms are coming around. Now we got the center is over in here. We want to feel this pull down the middle here. Okay. As we pull off of that center, again we're coming around the corner. See these forms pulling down, coming through. You're working around the corner. Okay. The rib cage is going back behind, and we feel these forms coming off of the rib cage. And again, pulling down. Now, when we get into the pelvis right here, we're talking about, we're seeing the end of the bone in here. And we get the sartorius is trying to come down this way. The tensor, even though it's relaxed, is still a point that's coming across in here. Now, we need to take and really make an effort to show that this part of the leg is coming out. We really work around over that surface. We feel here the trochanter is pushing out again, and we can feel the buttocks muscles pulling off of the pelvis, pushing down. You can see coming out from behind that. See more of the buttocks muscles coming out, but pulling in here. And we keep building, going down the side some more. and going underneath. Now the leg is slightly turned, so I want to see, let me pull back on this a little bit here. Let's see, the end of the knee is really, if you're using the box form again, it helps us to see the angle this more. Okay. And the leg is coming across, and we got the foot coming up here. The pressure is pushing up against us, so this is forcing out the biceps of the femur underneath on top of that foot. Now back here, we can take and still get the feeling of the forms fitting one into the other to help us see that volume coming over the surface, coming through. Again, overlap, overlap, overlap. Make forms going behind, pull out in front. Now, same on the other side. You want to feel this. You're making the lines go around. Pull from there. Forms overlapping, fitting in. And here's where we would take, again, we would make a real strong point for getting these forms to tuck behind, pressure, these pulling from behind, going up. Tension that's being created in here. Now, as this leg comes forward, we try to really make these forms go through, coming over the top. This is taking and coming down, fitting in. So we're dealing with that foreshortening. The end of the knee, you take and work over, across. We're actually thinking of how the bone comes through, how the patella is in here, tendons, or we're seeing actually the top of the tibula, the tendon pulling down to that kneeling point on the tibula. Okay. Now, that's all of this is coming back. We get the calf now. Here is another one. This is going back this way and really pulling down into the shin. Tension being created as we go over these forms in here. Okay. Okay, this pose we got some focusing on the pelvic and upper leg area there. First we take and try to see the overall, really visualize the rib cage, round, form. You want to see, again, there's a twist, taking coming through. Visualize the pelvis, the angle, cross, and the fact that you're actually getting, this is a very definitely a box type form going back in space. You're really seeing this type of thing. Okay. And the leg then taking and coming out of that again, treating this as a cylinder, but keeping in mind that this, I'm really constructing the figure here now. Lower leg going down. This one taking, going out. Cylinder type form first. Now we can go in a little closer and really focus on the relationship of that pelvis to the rib cage. First, since he's really going back, you want to see the fact that we're looking underneath. Yes. You want to really feel, seeing under the rib cage, and that it's really pushing out through here, pushing back really coming out underneath. Now, as this pelvis shoves up into this, the corner, you again see the pull of these external oblique as they take and wraps around behind. And it's coming from the corners. I start to actually working with the tone here, so I use that as a way of taking and showing where it's coming from. Okay. Come across, look for navel. You can see the stomach muscles pulling down. And we would take and actually go through here as a series of steps going across and trying to think around with it. Now he's really also there's a twist taking place here, so not only you feel the rib cage coming around here, we feel the external oblique taking and pulling across, and we get a series of pulls as this twists and wraps over that surface with the edge, those forms coming through here. Now pelvis is pushed up against that, and we start to feel the overlapping forms. Stepping back in, come over the whole pubic area here, top of the shape, muscles coming down. Here you can see that goes behind. You can feel this flat area being created by the tensor and the sartorius. Now, first take the left leg here, and first what we try to do is see this as a cylinder. So we've been doing. Then from that, you've got your straight to build on. You pull up, and you feel the volume. Volume. Come out from underneath. Through. Making round. Same thing on the other side now. You feel the corner, the form. Go across the end of the knee, looking for the corner. Feel the patella coming off the end again, pushing the sides of it back. Down. The fibula. And feel the muscles of the calf coming from there. Look at the center here, where you get the shin, both sides, pushing down. And we come out behind. Okay. Now, as we step back in, got this straight. Going back in, you can feel the muscles coming out. Again, we're just really basic talking about overlapping forms, constructing around. Feel the buttocks coming out from behind here now. You can see first we feel it pulling in to where the trochanter, then actual muscles coming out from underneath, overlapping, putting it. But it's a series, again, it's a series of simple overlapping forms. Now, you take that whole twist, let's just take, we've got a couple of minutes here, take and add to that twist a little bit. As that twist is pulling up, you can see how I continue that same movement. Working from the pit of the neck here. You feel the pull. That's the line. Oh, I'm taking away from it. Pull. Up. Going up. And the stretching of these forms as they come off that rib cage. You feel the stretch. And if you're still thinking the rib cage underneath here, now you can see how building from that. And in this case here, that arm is really a cylinder going up. You're taking and pull forms going up. As that side is lifting, then it would be logical to push the other side down. And you would work with the forms going over surface. In this case, we've got the head really going back, underneath the chin, going over the surface, corners of the jaw. Going back.